Hello, this is Sadbir Malli. The topic of our discussion in this video tutorial is piecewise and absolute value function. What is a piecewise function? When the function is defined by two or more different functions in pieces, these type of functions are sort of called a piecewise function. So as you can see in this example, one function has two pieces, 1 minus x and x square. So there are two functions, 1 minus x and x square. The function is defined using these two pieces, put them together. So there is some structure of piecewise function which we really need to understand and which is also important. The first one is piecewise function has two columns, the column number 1 and the column number 2. The column number 2 represent the input. So this is the input column and that is the output column. So when we evaluate a piecewise function at certain input, first we have to look into the rows of the input and see in which input row our value of the input variable belong. So let me take an example here. So for example, if I want to calculate what is the value of f of -1, so first I have to look x is equal to -1. So x is equal to -1 is not in this row because here x is between 0 and 4. So x cannot be -1 here. So x can be a -1 here. So x is equal to -1 belongs to this row. So it's not in this row, it's in the first row. So since this belongs to the first row, so the only output which really concern to me is in the first row. So I will look into the output, which is a 1 minus x as the place of x. I'm gonna have a placeholder, and in that placeholder I will place this -1, and therefore this will be 1 minus minus plus is equal to 1, that is equal to 2. So this is the value of my input, x is equal to 1. This is the value of my function at the input, x is equal to -1. Now let's calculate what is f0. Again, f0 belongs to the first row, x is equal to 0 is here again. Now if it is 0, that is belong to the first row. So my function is a 1 minus parentheses with the placeholder and place 0 in the placeholder. Similarly, if I calculate f1, now x is equal to 1 is in the second row because x is between 0 and 4. The 1 is between 0 and 4, so x is in the second row. So I will take the second input or output, another word, the output which is in the second row, and I place x by the input which I'm trying to calculate at 1. So I get 1. So now if I take the last example, which is a 2, this one is again in the second row, x is equal to 2 is in the second row because x is equal to 2 is lies between 0 and 4. Therefore, the square of the output is the square of my input, and my input is 2. So this is equal to 4. Now our next problem is to plot the graph of this piecewise function. So again, so plotting the graph of the piecewise function is first you have to identify the input. So this is the input line, or what we call x-axis. So input line in term when you have a piecewise function is divide by these pieces. These divide by these row of the input variable. So one row of the input variable is when all the value of x is less than 0. So all the values of x is less than 0 here. And another row, which is basically all the values of x is between 0 and 4. So which is like here, maybe let's suppose this is a 4 here, or value. And function has no value after beyond 4. So it has a value before a 0, it has a value between 0 and 4, and it does not have any value after 4. So that is also important. So there will be no graph of the function after 4. So when the function has a value less than 0, here the graph of the function, the value of the function is f is equal to 1 minus x. And on the other side, the function is basically f of x is equal to x square. So on this line, the function is the second output, which is in the second row, because that is the second input line also. And here value is a 1 minus x of x, because this is function is belongs to the input of the very first row. So now we will plot the graph of 1 minus x. So as we know, 1 minus x, the equation of this is a straight line with a slope -1. And also when x is 0, the value of the output is 1. So basically this is sort of, here is 1 somewhere, and that is the equation of the line. So this is the equation of the line when you have basically 1. So this is a f of x is equal to 1 minus x. Now the second equation, which is like in the yellow input, so I will make this line in a red because that is coming from the red input. Now from the yellow output, the function is y is equal to x square. So it is a power function, or in other words, this is a quadratic function, and it is a graph is parabola. And the parabola is when is starting from basically 0, because when I put the input 0, the value of the um, output is also sort of a 0. It's going to start from 0, but there is a hole in the 0, so there is a hole here in the 0, and the parabola is basically, and then the value at a 4 is a 16, so it's going to be somewhere here 16. If I plug 4 here, it's going to be a 16 solid, and that's going to be a parabola. So this will be the graph of this function in 2 pieces. So always there will be a 2 piece of the graph if you have a piecewise function. And if you have a piecewise function which is defined as a 3 pieces, there will be a 3 piece in the graph of the function. Now next, what is an absolute value function? Actually, absolute value function is a piecewise function. So again, it will be make more sense if we plot the graph of this function. So as you can see, there are 2 pieces, or there are 2 input. The one is basically input line. The first row says when x is all positive, and the second input line is basically when say the x is all negative. So they are basically, the domain of the function is divided into 2 pieces when x is positive and x is a negative. When x is a positive, the graph of the function is equal to x actually, or the function is f of x is equal to x. When the function is negative, or the domain of the function is a negative, the value of the function is f of x is equal to minus x. So we know that the graph of the function f of x is equal to is a straight line which has a 45-degree angle, or you can basically plot the graph of the function f of x is equal to x, but we only gonna graph when basically on the domain of the function. And the graph of this function f of x is equal to minus x is also a straight line, but it has a -1 slope, so it's gonna be like this. So this is in total, this is the graph of the absolute value function. This function is also sometimes denoted by absolute. This function is also denoted sometime by absolute value of x, which is just simply means when x is positive, the value of the function is equal to x. When x is a negative, value of the function is equal to negative x. Our next topic is how to solve equations when you have absolute value, because sometimes you have absolute value function and you want to find the root of that function, so you have to solve equation. So for example, if you have x plus 1 plus 5 is equal to 9, how you solve that equation? To solve absolute value function equation, or the equation which has absolute value, first you have to have the absolute value on one side and anything which you have is on the other side. So I have 5 on the left hand side. So I subtract 5 on both sides to make absolute value on one side and the constant on the other side. Because absolute value function only produce positive value. So if when you solve the next step, if there is a negative sign on the right hand side, then there is a no solution because absolute value cannot be a negative number. But in our situation, it is a positive, so we should be able to solve. So again, I said that there are two pieces of absolute value function. So here we're going to have a two piece. We're going to have the function is going to be is equal to exactly is equal to 4, or the function which is inside of that is going to be a negative. So you can remove the absolute value by taking the inside of the function is equal to the right hand side, and taking the inside the function is equal to the minus of that number which is on the right hand side. So you have to solve these two equations in order to find the complete solution of the absolute value function. So as you can see, this will give you the solution 3, because I subtract -1 from both sides, and this will give you the solution -5. And you can also verify that if I plug 3 in the very first equation, I get 3 plus 1 absolute value plus 5 is equal to 9, which is equal to 4 plus 5 is equal to 9. 9 is equal to 9 because absolute value 4 is 4. 4 plus 5 is equal to 9. If I plug -5, is going to be a minus 4 plus 5 is equal to 9. But the absolute value of any number is positive, so it's going to be a 4 plus 5 is equal to 9, so 9 is equal to 9. So it means this has a solution. Okay, next I have one quiz problem for you to practice. Please pause the video for 1 and 2 minutes and work on this problem. This is also the end of this video tutorial. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.